Hi everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of Infopedia, your source for all your information needs. I'm Krage too.
I'm Frankie.
And I'm T-Fed.
Today, we'll be talking about a subject that's near to all of our hearts as we are all musicians. This character has played a major role in the development of several popular music genres and has really shaped the way that sound occurs even right now. Who are we talking about, Frankie?
Well, hold on. Before we get started, I would like for Frankie to
the sponsors.
The sponsor. That's right. And by the way, please subscribe to our Patreon. We're at $100,000 dollars a day now.
If we get one more patron, we will officially be able to qualify as a tax exempt church.
That's correct.
That's right.
Tithe and pray, baby. Today we are sponsored by, once again, Lucky Strike cigarettes. Well, what can I say? We all love to smoke, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I love smoking.
There's nothing quite like adding that growl that a cigarette gives you to the voice.
Yeah.
Especially as musicians. We are looking to renew our sound and reinvent ourselves in any way. Mm-hmm. And why not take it directly to the lung, you know?
Take it straight to the dome.
Yeah, straight from plant to lung. Mm-hmm. That's the
only the most ethically sourced tobacco in the whole of the industry.
That's correct.
Did you know that they have a new Tabasco flavored tobacco that
really?
they're and that's something
Caliente.
Muy picante. So, can you eat them or just smoke them?
No, so you can smoke them. But what they do is they light your lungs on. Not literally on fire because your body is fluid, of course. But
right.
But it makes you feel like your lungs are on fire, even more than normal than when smoking, which is what all smokers love and appreciate about cigarettes.
We love the smoke.
That's right.
Love the heat. Love the fire.
It makes you feel wise.
It makes me feel sexy. But I would never say that on a podcast.
So make sure to use our coupon code Infopedia for 9% off your 9th purchase, or Infopedia 1 to get 1% off of your first purchase. And with that, let's move on to the show.
Terms and conditions may apply.
So, you guys know us. We're music. We do some musicianing on the side, right?
Yeah.
I do some in the front and the back.
Oh, of course. We all know you for that.
Especially the back with this guy.
Oh.
Let's move on. So, who we're talking about today, Frankie?
We're talking about Brendon Urie. We all know him from popular band Panic at the Disco and for playing Boots on the hit musical Kinky Boots.
I think this is one of the most interesting stories that we've covered in the long history of this podcast, because the amount of sheer time that one person's life can span indicates the amount of influence that they have had of industry.
I'm kind of curious because, as we're all musicians, how has Brendon Urie's art form affected your sort of creative output?
I started wearing more feathers. Because there was a big feather phase with that guy, and with the whole band.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
When they were trying to be the Beatles, they were like, "What are the Beatles like?" Peacock feathers.
Right.
That's right. To attract mates.
Yeah. I
think more than just the music, really, Brendon Urie really speaks to me, as I am also an ostrich farmer. In Temecula, California, I was introduced to the idea of ostrich farming by a fan of Panic at the Disco, and I said to him,
at the Disco,
and I asked him, how can I possibly get into this? And he says, it's all right there, just listen to the music, and that the rest will happen naturally. And so I put on their phonographic cartridges, and now I've got a ranch. I've got 94 birds. They're all looking healthy and happy, and they bring me a lot of joy. I'm still looking into a way to kind of monetize the industry, but we're farming them away, and so far it's very successful. They mostly have the breeding part figured out.
So I guess we could start from the beginning. So Brendon Urie, as we know, was born in 1901 in Chicago, Chicago, Illinois, to a certain Brenda and Uriel Urie. Now, Brenda was from Suburbia, and Uriel was from Nebraska. So they both immigrated to the U.S. from their respective countries. Uriel was a licensed fishmonger, but what happened was he lost his credentials once he moved to the U.S. After that, he worked as a medical doctor.
Yeah, it's a really sad story. A lot of people will start in a foreign country with a really successful career and then be forced to do medical practicing once they come to the United States. It's interesting because while Brendon was an only child, he did have a twin in the womb, which was confirmed by his mother, Brenda. And the doctors at the time suggested that it's possible that Brendon Urie's twin was eaten in the womb by Brendon himself.
Well, I heard that that whole story was what inspired the song "I Ate My Child in the Womb."
Oh,
or
I ate my twin in the womb.
I ate my twin.
Yeah, that kind of adds up. But let's try to steer away from hearsay and speculation when it comes to this stuff, because we don't have him on the podcast yet. But we'll have to confirm. But
I don't think
there is not a way for him to be on the podcast.
And besides, it's not called Speculatepedia. It's called Infopedia.
Yeah,
that's a good point. So, Franklin, you want to take us away? Tell us a little bit about his music and his childhood.
Well, Brendon was unique in that he couldn't speak up until the age of 14. And it's not so much that he couldn't speak as that he wouldn't speak. But he would sing. And so what he would do is sing everything that he wanted to say, which led him to constantly writing his own songs so that he could say the things that he wanted to say.
Right.
Up until 14, and then he eventually basically sped up the singing until it was so fast that it just sounds like words, and it became words.
It's kind of like if you take a clip of audio and you speed it up twice as much, you've increased the tempo by 2, right?
Right.
If you speed it up by 4, you've increased the tempo by a factor of 4. But you can continue to speed this up until the frequencies will wrap back around and starts aliasing. And so by implementing a tactic like this, he was able to sing, in a way that sounded monotone, as if it was speaking. And I believe the first thing that he ever said without singing was, "Hey, what's up?"
Pretty groundbreaking stuff.
So, do you want to talk to us about what kind of instruments you like to play?
So, I know we today we all know him as the great guitarist, but he actually didn't pick it up until much later. He had a real passion for the oboe. He practiced it every day when he was living in Chicago.
For those who don't really know what a oboe sounds like, could you kind of just do an impression of one?
Oh, sure, yeah. It's sort of like, it's windy, like. And that's basically the best you're gonna get.
It's the best I want.
That's the best I have.
I'm sorry. Another hobby that he had while growing up in Chicago.
Let me guess, ice skating.
Well, I mean, you know what they say about Chicago.
It's all about
ice. It's all about the ice.
All I got.
It's all about the ice and all about the skating.
Was he any good?
Oh my God, he's won several local figure skating competitions in his time there. Like as a young pup too, he was a youngin'.
Yeah, that's wild.
How young was he when he won his first competition?
I know this is hard to believe. He was 4 years old.
That's insanity.
What was the oldest competitor for that competition? Do you know?
14.
Wow.
I had a 10-year head start on all those other losers.
That's right.
That's what they call them in Chicago.
They don't call him a prodigy for nothing, you know.
One of the things I think is most interesting about this is that his father's prior trade of fishmongering left such a huge, palpable impact on Brendon. So Brendon grew up with this incredible affinity for fish and the ocean. Despite very famously, we're all aware, being an anti-fish advocate during his early career. We'll have to touch on that a little bit later. But there's in his autobiography, he talks about a very formative moment, when his family took him to a trip to Lake Michigan in the tourist city of Discovia. And they spent a day swimming there, and it was discovered that his body produces a very special pheromone that made him completely irresistible to almost all sea creatures, which naturally created a sort of puckering, nibbling, feeding frenzy on every part of his body. And I do mean every part of the body, inside, as some parts on the outside, mostly on the inside.
It was graphic.
It was graphic.
I'm surprised he lived through it.
Yeah, really.
Right.
I mean, well, it caused lots of trauma, and it really impacted his psychological development. And I believe that this was a part of the reason that they were prompted to move from Chicago to the city of Las Vegas at around age 14.
Okay, around the time he started to speak then.
But the Great Nevada Bay, which, of course, rest in peace.
Oh, I know. It's such a tragedy.
It's a real tragedy what happened, but
Never forget.
But yeah, as you said, this was the time that he had learned to speak normally, and he's at that point he was like sort of starting to fit in with the other children a bit better, kind of getting a little bit hip with it. He did have a knack for like sort of fitting in with the cool crowds. You know?
Yeah, especially after he learned to just talk like a regular person instead of a strange freak. But it was a sad time for Brendon because, unfortunately, he no longer have access to his skating rinks as he loved, since the climate was so much warmer and the concept of refrigeration wouldn't come for another 100 years.
Okay, Space Novelties was a candy manufacturer founded in 1888 PM by Franz Michel Space. It was known for their strange treats, as well as chewing gum products like dip, which is more of a colloquial word by the younger crowd, but their dip came in many flavors and had an irresistible addictive quality. This guy, Franz Space, was known amongst his peers as a cunning businessman, but also was suspected to use pretty shady practices to propel his business further. For example, the company established a dominance in the Great Nevada Bay region, establishing trade routes with major urban centers. And then in 1908, Franz and Space began creating shops in many of these cities that served as hangout spots for teens, where he would sell his products, named the shops MySpace, based off of his surname, Space.
So, I think there was a big controversy about this, right?
That's right, in the Las Vegas region or location. See, because Las Vegas was technically a lost city, a lot of the local and federal ordinances of the state of Nevada did not apply to the establishment, and as such, they sold alcoholic beverages to minors, which is not good.
It's
but
not that. I mean, but is it? Come on.
I mean, kids.
I don't want to inject my personal bias into this, but I mean, I have never seen a drunk kid do anything wrong. I'm not going to go into it. I think I might as well talk about it because we're on the subject. But back when we had these lost cities where you were able to sell alcoholic beverages to minors, historically the incidents were minor compared to the number of great musicians and amazing local scenes that you had. And
that were born from that.
That was born from that alcohol-induced stupor. And it's just really pathetic that I think that we live in the kind of nanny state that thinks that they have the authority to control what I let my 9-year-old do on the weekends. But I digress. Let's talk a little bit more about the
formation, perhaps?
The formation
of Panic at the Disco.
That's right.
So, just starting high school, Brendon is still learning how to socialize and be hip because he's spent his whole life trying to fit in, and it's now finally paying off. All of this energy that he's invested in this is finally starting to accumulate some momentum. So he was a regular at MySpace, was there almost every single night, completely addicted to dip, which is, again, not such a big deal.
Very common back then.
Very common. And that's something that would be a part of his brand much later, with his hit songs that we've all learned to love from his early career, like Dippin' Dots, Dippin' Boys, Dip But No Drip.
I like that one.
That is such a classic.
But it's here that he made friends with a new incoming recordist, Brian Ross. And it turns out they went to the same high school, and they had this mutual interest in music that made them a natural fit for each other. Brian played the accordion, and it's very interesting that you're hearing this and you're like, huh?
The
accordion. He's actually the only person in civilized human history who's been able to play the accordion and survive.
So then Brendon took up guitar so that they could form a more complete band. And Brian Ross did not think the oboe was cool enough.
He called him a square.
And
believe it.
he wasn't wrong necessarily, but he could have gave that info to him a little nicer.
I feel like if he consulted the Infopedians, it would have been a lot nicer.
That's right.
Yeah.
As specialists in information.
As specialist information, we pride ourselves on being able to deliver that information in such a way that is palpable.
And free from bias.
Palatable, I should say, and free from bias. But Brian Ross was not able to do that. It did hurt Brendon feeling, and then he did have learn play guitar. So
That's right. And actually, a funny thing about so this is when the name Panic at the Disco sort of cropped up. And Urie would get a lot of questions about what does this mean exactly? What's this disco thing? What's this panic? Why is there an exclamation mark? But it turns out that it was based on his experience in Discovia. The experience with the fish caused him to panic at the city of Discovia.
Wow.
So it held a personal connection.
Yeah, that's really counterintuitive, and I think that many people don't know this.
Then they tried to write some songs.
Well, I mean, Urie was very, very talented as a songwriter due to his song speak ability. I mean, he could write full songs quickly and with ease. I mean, he would become so prolific that later he would claim in life that he'd write at least 1 to 3 songs a day for the rest of his career. I mean, and most of those at this point are unreleased or lost to time. But I mean, we can only imagine what those masterpieces could have been.
I mean, the more you think about it, the more it makes sense, because it's like, for him, that was talking for most of his life. So,
Right.
To him, that's just a normal day, But
Yeah.
it's like, do you remember every word you ever said?
It's almost not impressive. It's like, imagine you're living in a civilization of people who don't eat, and you tell them, I ate 3 times today. They're going to be blown away by that. But for a guy like me who eats 20 to 30 times a day,
Yeah.
it's just not very impressive. But in any case, in no time, they had recorded their first single, Dip But No Drip, which was performed at the MySpace in 1916. And because Dip was so popular with the youth at this time, it became an instant knockout hit. So our favorite character, Franz Space, caught onto this, and immediately he thought, I gotta get in on this action.
Yeah,
because
signs started going
dollar
through his
signs
eyes.
going straight to his face, because the dip was flying off the shelves. The teens were getting all dipped up, and he wanted to make a deal. He said, hey, you start making some more dip-based songs, I toss a couple nickels your way. And for the two musicians, they never thought they could make it. Then they were so young, they said, well, of course. So this was known as the band's dip period, which is seen by today as kind of an antiquated, but at the same time, the world hadn't heard music like this before, and it was actually rather subversive. And the counterculture that had developed based on the youth experiences was not an established concept as it would become in the 1960s and 70s. So, despite the fact that it seems sort of a capitalistic cash grab by a
predatory
commodifier,
which it was
producer.
not.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
this was
actually it
chill.
was.
Well, yeah, it was, but it's chill, but he's slick with it.
It was, but it was like
That's a
That was actually the intro to Dip But No Drip.
Yeah, we can only play like a fraction of a second.
yeah. We
Yeah,
have
we
to
didn't get the
gotta
rights.
keep it short and sweet.
Yeah.
So this is not going to seem relevant now, but it'll loop back around. So
always does.
we're going to talk about refrigeration for a sec. So refrigeration technology was invented by the brother-sister invention powerhouse Reginald and Frederick Ridge in 1917, also known as RF Ridge Technologies. For some reason, at the time of its invention, it wasn't thought to be used for food just yet.
A big contributing factor to this is most people ate food warm.
Yeah,
Right.
because it was
Cold
so
food, get out of town.
But Brendon Urie, he was kind of ahead of his time. He heard of the tech. I think he saw it in like a local ad somewhere. It was like, come here and buy our refrigeration technology or something.
I think that's what it would have sounded like.
I said that in
come here and buy a refrigeration technology
That's
Yeah.
crazy. It's like I'm in the room with the advertisement.
with
Right?
Wow.
our fridge. Yeah.
I feel is the advertisement in the room with you now?
My vision just went black and white.
That's wild.
So he wanted to use this technology somehow, and it would be pretty clear, and I think our listeners would know what would become of this.
Yeah, I mean, you guys already know where this is going.
So Space had a network of investors, including a man named Gregory Almost. And as well as being acquainted with Franz M. Space, he was also an investor in RF Ridge Tech and consistently called himself, quote, an ice fisher in a previous life.
I think this was a rather interesting turning point because Gregory Almost, when he met Brian Ross, it influenced Brian so much that Brian eventually became an ice fishing apprentice to Almost, despite that he had never caught a fish in his whole life. And because before this time, the concept of ice fishing was fishing for ice. So, the idea of catching a live prey, kind of, this was in the more traditional part of Chicago culture. You weren't eating, animals and plant life. You were eating inanimate objects like ice and rocks. So
At least for that decade.
At least for this decade. But now we have the perfect. We have the crucible is set and the reaction is ready because we have refrigeration technology. Mm-hmm. Then we have a bunch of investors with lots of money, and we have a very talented ice skater. So you can only imagine what's going to happen next. That is the on ice craze. So our heroes graduate from high school, and therefore they have much more free time because they're not practicing for the SATs, to focus more on the band and come up with the next ice skating innovation.
So, from the nostalgia of Brendon having ice skated in Chicago, he was motivated to restart this old passion for ice skating, but in Las Vegas this time. But living in Las Vegas, it, of course, would be an expensive endeavor. He would have to turn to Gregory Almost, that is, to gain access to both the refrigeration technology and the funding to do this crazy on ice idea.
Yeah. Brian Ross was not a fan of the ice skating. Like, he was kind of a hater, to be honest. He didn't like the oboe. He didn't like the ice skating. But But he was
wrong on
convinced
two
eventually.
fronts.
But he did eventually admit this later when from his mansion that he procured from this from this crazy idea. You know?
Exactly. Well, the money talks.
So eventually the funding was secured, and a side note, by the way, the investors thought that they were investing in the Recordian, but due to like a loophole in the contract, they ended up actually funding the whole show.
And not just the Recordian itself.
Yeah, which did cause some controversy, but that's
That's neither here nor there.
no.
Well, it's here, but it's definitely not there. But once again, Urie's plans were a rousing success. He moved from the niche market of youth dip music, which was, frankly, by the time he was out of high school, he was too mature and old to even qualify for this, and he would have been called a poser, and, he's starting to get some whiskers on his face. He's not popular with the kids anymore.
Right.
So he can finally move into the much more popular and new technology of ice skating musical performances that led to the whole on-ice craze. And today, as we all know, this art form has been known as vaudeville. So he practiced tirelessly in the rink, and he was so good that he even qualified for the Olympics.
Urie did?
Urie qualified for the Olympics.
Oh, damn.
After it was in high school. But unfortunately, he was unable to compete in the Olympics because the Olympics, as we know, were sponsored by big fish corporations and conglomerates that are focused in fish interest and lobby for their progression. And they were very opposed to this after Brian's hit protest song 1,000 Dead Fish, which is the name implies. And despite that, I really am a big proponent of keeping politics and art separate. And I don't really think that necessarily, even though we all know Brendon Urie hated fish, his song 1,000 Dead Fish isn't enough to really perjure him. It's really more satirical than anything. So despite that he was an avid fish hatist.
They didn't see it that way. You think it was satirical?
I was
Big Fish didn't see it that way.
Well, I don't really think about things in terms of whether they were true or not, but I think it's important that we should be able to say whatever we want at all times and get what we want out of every transaction, human or financial, despite what we say and do.
That's true. Yeah, you do say that a lot. So they were selling out crowds. They were bigger than ever.
Their vaudeville act.
Their vaudeville act.
Panic at the Disco.
Ice skating all across the rink, all across America, and even to countries like Nebraska and England and
all the rest of them.
And all the rest of them.
Most of the rest of them.
Yeah, they've been on world tours. They went to the World's Fair.
Did they go to the World's Fair?
They actually played the World's Fair.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they did.
Knockout
They
event.
headlined it.
Well, do you know what their single was for that?
The single was Lost Vegas, One and Only.
Oh my god. I haven't heard that.
That single on stage, and then they got it mixed, mastered, and published and printed to music disc before the show was over. So on the way out, everyone could stop at the gift shop and buy the new single from the song they heard and was recorded in front of them for the first time. And this all happened within the span of about 79 seconds.
That was a
world record.
That's a collector's item now.
Good luck getting your hands on that one.
Yeah, good luck. I don't know. What do I look like? I got $100 in my pocket? Give me a break.
Right.
But anyway, their career started to take off. More songs started to be anti-fish, which was something that resonated with the people of the Great Nevada Bay region, as fish were dangerous there, and being anti-fish was popular with the people.
It's more of a it was more of a part of the times. It's not really, not like we understand anti-fish today to be bad.
Right.
But yeah, as you were saying.
Supposedly in that region, the fish were labeled as dangerous. All of the fish were labeled as dangerous.
Right, and it wasn't without, I don't want to get, again, we're not this on a political podcast, but it's not like, if you look at the statistics, fish were responsible for so much.
In Nevada Bay?
So much in the Nevada Bay. So was it prejudiced? Yes, but was it justified?
Unprecedented, or
it was it was justified, I think. But anyway.
So he obviously, money talks. They kept making those kinds of songs, bringing in the dough. And during the height of Brendon's career, he was one of the richest men in America. He had several homes and owned exotic animals, including tigers, macaws, and get this, even horses.
Nah, that's not something that you hear every day.
Oh, he also had a hot spring business that he operated for a few years that dubiously employed macaques.
Sorry, back up. They employed
macaques.
Monkeys, to do what?
To work, to labor.
That's interesting.
More specifically, what did they do?
Well,
serve,
run the show,
deliver towels.
They would deliver towels. They would welcome the guests. They would
operate the register. Finances and accounting. They would book people. They would
make reservations.
Run the payroll.
So it was kind of wow.
Including maintenance and acquiring spare parts, doing the construction.
It's almost like he didn't do anything.
he was mostly the owner, as
Sure.
we say. He and the other thing is, because macaques are simple primates, they're not able to grasp like advanced concepts like getting money for work. So they were reduced to do things like engineering and business administration instead. But it is about this time when a lot of knockoff groups started cropping up, and it's about time.
Like Codville groups?
Yeah, exactly. There was a lot of ones that we've known today that were, started at this time, which was, honestly, it took them so long because Brendon was so talented. It took them a long time to even figure out what the heck they were doing. But when Buster and Trigley got on stage and famously did their act of making a sandwich on stage, which was, even though it's a bit derivative, I do think that part actually managed to hold water in terms of its creativity.
Room and Weed was a big one.
Room and Wheat they are pretty good, I will say. I actually like them more than Brendon Urie by a long shot.
Really?
But the Rabbit Whiskers, which were the first Wop Do group, started around this time as a knockoff band of the Codville act. Chris R., who's the world's first DJ, and even Shirley Temple had an On Ice special in the Codville fashion, which was all really something that until this point only two people were able to do until someone saw it, and then rooms and the crowds full of people were able to understand what was going on.
Right, so it was totally mainstream at this point.
Yeah, by this time it's pretty much, the ship has sailed. This is, it's not even countercultural, really.
Honestly, and it was only a matter of time before this Codville bubble, On Ice bubble, was about to burst. Like, they had already made many enemies in the music and fish industry, mostly from jealousy at their ingenuity,
Right.
but honestly, Pobity's Nerfict, they did end up rubbing people's scales the wrong way, Like, for example, Brendon was secretly a fish lover. This was, when people found this out,
Hugely controversial.
oh my
Yeah,
god.
I think
dude.
the whole phenomena was labeled Fishgate when this came out because it was so controversial.
That makes sense because it was a whole secret. It was the secrecy around it. He had written
And
diary entries about how the great Nevada Bay's drainage from the 30s to the 90s was going to disrupt and ruin the lives of millions of fish, which is crazy considering what he had gone through as a youth.
Yeah, and what he had said about them so publicly.
Yeah.
And let's not forget that, Brendon Urie's, while justified in hating fish at the time, which was not okay now, but okay then, it did create a lot of violence towards fish that a lot of people thought was unwarranted. And then to find out that he was sympathetic to them the whole time really confused people.
It was really tragic, a lot of the things that they did back then to fish. I mean, they used to inject mercury into them just to bring out the flavor more.
And while it did work, it wasn't good for you.
It wasn't good for the fish, but it's good for the people.
No,
eating.
It's not. Is it?
The mercury?
No, it's not good.
It's not good? Okay. No. That's what I thought.
Remains to be seen whether
That's what I
mercury is
thought I
good
said,
or not
yeah.
good for
Yeah.
For human consumption.
We don't know yet. So this led us to an era after Fishgate occurred, which has colloquially been termed the post-Fishgate era. Brendon is not doing as well as he was in his heyday. He lost several deals with major companies, which is a big hit, but he was also exiled and shunned by the majority of society at this point. So concerts after the scandals had very poor attendance, with protesters outside throwing bottles and accusing him of all sorts of things.
Dead fish, too, if you believe it.
Yeah.
Live fish, dead fish.
Dead fish.
You name it.
Live fish throwing dead fish.
Red fish, blue fish.
One fish, two fish.
That's what they said. So eventually, unfortunately, Panic at the Disco had to break up in 1941 due to Brian Ross really just wanted to branch out, focus more on ice fishing with Gregory Almost. They had created a separate ice farming business, unbeknownst to Brendon Urie, which kind of came up in a lot of legal discussions because they were supposed to disclose all of their financial shared interest. But as it turns out, they kind of saw the writing on the wall with Brendon Urie. And it's been speculated, although Brian Ross has never said this on record, but it's been speculated that Gregory Almost and Brian Ross knew about that Fishgate was coming, and they were hedging their bets against the music itself, which was a little messed up, but all things that is when it's all of when their money is.
Yeah, it's funny that that business is still survived to this day.
That's right.
Almost Industries.
Almost Industries, yeah, that's what it's known as now.
So, kind of as a washed-up celebrity, but wanting to remain relevant, he hopped on the reality TV kind of
bandwagon.
bandwagon.
It was a bandwagon, huh?
Yeah, it did not last, I'll tell you.
Yeah, he had a pet show called The Dog Screamer, which was, unfortunately, how many episodes did that show make?
I think it was just 2. I think it was 2 and they pulled it.
They pulled the production because the dogs didn't like it.
I think if I ever, yeah, that's right.
Which makes sense, right?
I didn't have the number on the top of my head, but if I remember correctly, they filmed each episode like the day of. It was a bit of a rush job, and they was airing the second episode, and they said, "You guys, we're tanking. We have to call this off." And then they said we had already rented all of the dogs to be screamed at, and unfortunately, because the dogs were bound for the pound, as they say, they all had to be euthanized on stage, which was just a horrible massacre. And you would have thought there were kids there. Brendon was practicing and screaming in the green room. Exactly. So
total disaster.
Yeah. Oh man. But he in the 70s he tried a new career, right?
Oh yeah, this was his whole philosophy phase. A lot of people don't talk about this. He grew a beard. No one. I mean,
he got some like round glasses and a whiteboard he carried around everywhere.
Yeah.
Annoying as fuck.
I don't think anyone gave really cared at that point.
Yeah, it was honestly pretty much downhill for this guy from then on. I mean, he lived to be at least 90, which is sick. At 90, for him being 90 years old, that's when the internet started to take hold. And a website that he found familiar, it was called MySpace, revered Urie as a figurehead of counterculture for his innovations earlier in his career.
Innovations?
Well,
innovations.
His inventions, his innovations.
It's interesting because
inventions, that's a good word.
Because for a website that was so focused on bringing to light new artists and creating a scene for independent musicians to flourish online, it was very interesting that Brendon Urie was so captivated by the Warped Tour scene, like 2000s punk and subculture, despite the fact that his music was largely considered to be sort of out of style for the past,
70 years.
Yeah. At this point, most people have forgotten about Fishgate. How are we doing on time on this episode, by the way?
Yeah, like how many slides do we have left?
How many slides do we have to go through?
I'm not sure. I don't have a count. Just a couple.
Okay. Well, let's see if we want.
Can you list can you read the names of the slide? Yeah, the titles or something like.
I'll just summarize.
All right. Yeah. So yeah,
Sure,
what are like the titles of the slides?
Let's get that one. Let's see. So another controversy developed. There were some opposing accounts of the story. I wanted to talk about the positive version, the negative side of that event, personal opinions on the version, the story develops. Another character enters the fray. The team expands, an institution develops. The world changes in a fundamental way, as we know. And,
all right.
No going back.
No going back.
I would have liked to compare the world before and after, but we can't really get into that at the moment. There's a new unruly technology introduced, and then which influenced this new institution. Followers were increasing. The religion developed. Urie's total control. There was a lot of societal unrest. First incident between the followers and the naysayers. Lots of bloodshed, as we all know. I don't want to get into it right now.
Maybe next.
There was a government intervention.
Oh my god.
Brendon Urie went to the moon for some reason. And then, of course, the big incident, which
So that previous incident wasn't the big.
Well,
Big
we,
Well, there
as
were
we all
two.
know.
There was the
Oh my gosh.
There were several
Knowledge.
factors that led up to that. It was just a right place, right time thing.
Yeah.
Powder keg.
Details of the big incident. The government had to intervene once again.
Right.
Urie was in danger. There was factions forming between the followers. There was the two leaders. There was and Brendon Urie went back to the moon as the chaos was unfolding on
Right,
Earth.
I mean, just hide out, I guess.
Tensions were at an all-time high until eventually the execution started to play out. Person one involved. There was
Multiple people involved.
there were multiple people involved.
In their interactions.
There was
Interesting.
location, publicity of the execution. There
Right.
were some opposing factions
Right.
interacting there. There was another noticeable. There's great atmosphere with that though. Urie was in a rugged physical state.
He was in a.
He addressed the world. Urie's final actions. There was a method of execution, immediate impact. Faction 1, Faction 2, they both had their separate reactions.
Yeah.
There was an understanding forming between them. Then someone took the reins. There were peace talks. Lots of notable.
Right, we gotta talk
so,
with the people of the peace talks, of course.
opinions. One of the factions dissolved, but the other remained, but obviously it's changed forever. There was a gradual return to normalcy. Overall impact was immeasurable, as we all know. Lots of lessons learned.
And the final one was overall opinions.
That's right. Yeah. So those are the slides that.
Do you think we'll have time to reach all of those in
like, the
this
next
episode? We have about
1 minute.
We have about 1 minute. Do you think we can cover all that?
What?
I mean,
Maybe why don't we split it? Let's just make this a two-parter.
Yeah, because it seems like we've barely scratched the
Yeah.
surface here.
Honestly, I was more excited about his early life. I always thought that the moon controversy was a little bit.
I'm tempted to disagree. I feel like that sounds like pretty important.
Yeah.
We've studied this in high school. Have we not?
Well,
Yes, but I think that it's worth giving more information and detail.
that's what Infopedia is all about.
Yeah.
After all.
So he was executed.
Yeah.
And he was executed.
He was all over the news.
Why should I know? Why didn't I
And the
know
faction. We're all running out of time here, so thank you so much to all of our wonderful listeners. We're looking forward to hearing from you and your fan mail. Do we have time to do a fan letter?
We do.
Okay.
Let's see. So let me rustle up some mail from the fans. I have a message here. This one's addressed to T-Fed. It says,
me, huh?
Dear T-Fed, I am a huge fan of Infopedia. I've been listening since episode 1. Oh, well, first of all, thank you.
Aww.
And I had one question about the Infopedia research process. It seems... Oh, this is a long... Now, guys, next time you send it, just write the question. We don't need all this background. It doesn't help.
Preamble.
No preamble.
It's fine.
I'm gonna... okay. What is...
I like the long question.
What's the
better.
best way to get all of this research information? It seems like you guys have such a leg up on the other information on the podcast, and a big... Yeah, okay, your name, whatever. So
let's at least read their name.
Ivy.
Ivy.
Thank you, Ivy, for the
Yeah.
question.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, 444
That's right.
in Roman numeral terms.
Uh-huh. So, that's right.
Yes.
Four times.
Of course.
4 by 4.
How could I? 16.
Yeah. What was the question?
Where do you get all your research information? What gives you the leg up on the game?
My research so my process for doing a lot of research is journalists and writers
journalists,
and producers, they what they like to do, the established technique is to go out into the zone and learn.
It's called zone work.
It's called zone work.
We've all done zone work.
We've all done zone work, and I
high
have lots of experience with zone work in the past. But what I've learned recently is to start meditating and
The answers are all out there.
Well, the answers are out there within space.
And they're
time.
also in there, too.
They're in there.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, a lot of the things that you read about are true, but the thing is, like, you can't just rely on what you read and what you hear and what you see and what you smell and taste. You have to look for the facts on the inside when it comes to history.
Yeah. Do you know, when you read something, close your eyes and ask yourself if you know it to be true. And that's the real difference, what we're looking at
I think
here.
that's what really gives us the advantage is so many people are reliant on
outside sources.
outside knowledge when they don't really listen to the inside knowledge.
You know, it is the inside which is the most important. I mean, I love to say this, but everyone's insides are beautiful.
And make your insides black with our sponsor, Lucky Strike cigarettes.
Black as tar, black as night. I want to smoke your cigs tonight. We have time for one more question, and this time I'm going to hand it over to T-Fed over here.
That's right. Yeah, this one comes from Amelia M. Cohen from the Edge of the Wood, and she asks, "Hey team."
There's a lot of spaces. Oh, you know what? I think I know what your issue is. The text is really small. Frankie, do you have your glasses?
Yeah, let me get my glasses.
Get your glasses on and then try reading that.
Yeah, that's okay. Here's what it says. Dear T-Fed, you are being summoned for a jury duty on the August 14th of 2023 at the Marina Courthouse for I'm not allowed to say what it's about.
Yeah, it's really interesting that they start mentioning what the nature of the trial is beforehand. They say the crime, and honestly, they even say what the verdict you're supposed to give is, which is...
I always thought that was sketchy.
I always thought that was not really due process, but I think that the government knows better. I mean, with all the
Yeah,
recent developments.
I have a full trust in the government. So I'm just gonna go in and do my part. It's not really a fan letter. I think it must have gotten mixed in with a fun bag.
But if they to answer your question, I think it's when it's over, the important parts will always be as true as when it was when you were there. And frankly, even if everyone knows exactly when it is, you'll never see when it's coming right behind you. It's really magical. It's a magical thing.
Well, that just about does it for us here on Infopedia.
And remember to use the coupon code Infopedia.
Yeah, that's right. Just rewind the episode if you want to. Infopedia 1 for 1%
off your first purchase.
Yeah.
And you know what? They are so expensive that 1% is
It makes a huge difference.
They had a huge protest about it in 2010. Anyway, thanks everyone. Signing off today. Your Infopedians. I'm Kraish too.
I'm Frankie.
And I'm T-Fed.
Stay info.